Hello and welcome to another episode of the Calm Within the Storm podcast with me, Sam Lyon.
Everything can change, even the world we live in.
This episode will be all about couples communication. We'll be touching on a few different topics that might cause friction in a relationship. And we'll also look at how to discuss difficult topics with your partner and how best to listen when your partner is trying to communicate a difficult subject with you. So who better to join me for the couples communication episode than my very own other half of my couple, Mason. So this episode, we'll split this into kind of two halves really. And the first part, we're going to talk about how to communicate difficult subjects and difficult conversations. And the other half is going to be all about the topics that are frequent kind of friction causes in relationships.
Yeah.
And I'm going to dive straight in with one of the polls because I think it's just a nice starting point. I asked the audience, how comfortable do you currently feel discussing your mental health with your partner? And the options were very comfortable, fairly uncomfortable, and very uncomfortable. And 66% said very comfortable, which is really positive.
Well, that's not bad.
That's really good.
Pretty good.
Really good. Fairly uncomfortable came in at 24%. Fairly uncomfortable, 7%, and very uncomfortable, only 3%.
Okay.
Which is really, really positive.
That is good. It's
Really
a shame
positive.
that there are still some who are
Yeah.
very uncomfortable.
Yeah. We'll work through that in this episode. I then asked, do you feel like your partner listens and understands when you discuss your mental health with them? And the options were yes, very often, yes, sometimes, no, not very often, and never. So this is not just communicating your problem, this is how well you feel like in your relationship you are observed and appreciated and understood.
Yeah.
So yes, very often came in at 48%, which again is amazing.
That's still really good.
Yes, sometimes was 34%.
Okay.
Not very often was 18%. And never was actually 0%, which is amazing.
That is good.
Amazing. There's still a little bit of work in the not very often, but never, that's a really good result.
Yeah, that is good.
I think that's like an interesting thing because I think it's one thing to be able to talk openly. Like that takes a lot of guts in itself. But then knowing how to respond and how to listen is a whole new skill set.
Yeah, it is.
You know about your love language, like the acts of service, words of affection, and that kind of thing. And I think somewhere along the line, there's also like a coping language. Because we are very different in this regard. And we've only learned this, I think, through having mental health troubles that we talk to each other about.
Yeah.
Because if you're trying to cope with something, you like to be left alone and you just deal with it on your own in your head and you need to like problem solve things.
Yeah.
Whereas I can't be left alone. I do not want to be left alone at all if I'm struggling.
Yeah, and it's not just being left alone, it's also that you don't want me to necessarily come and just try and fix the problems.
Yeah.
Like, you want me to be there for emotional support.
Yeah.
And almost like a shoulder to cry on, I guess.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, if I'm anxious about something or something stressed me out, I want to just go away and almost like lock myself away, deal with the problem myself, find a solution, and then maybe bring the solution to you and say, here's the problem, here's how I'm going to fix it.
Yeah, and then you just need to talk at me. I
need
think you don't need engagement.
I don't.
You just...
And that's really mean because like, you're a very smart person and you could help me solve these problems, but I don't want that almost.
Yeah,
I just
that's
want
not how
you
your
to
brain works.
No, I just need a sounding board basically to just nod and be like, yeah, very good, crack on. That's all I want.
But that's really interesting because when you have your own way of coping with something, you kind of turn off from everybody else's way of doing it and you just think everyone does things the way I do them. And I think that's how we've learned about each other through that era. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest one that stands out for me, and I know I've touched on this in quite a few episodes, but this was probably the biggest thing in our relationship, was the passing of my dad. Because I, at that point, had never been through something so extreme before. And I didn't know how to deal with it. And I didn't know what was going to work for me and what I needed to do. I had no idea. Like, nothing felt like it was working.
Yeah.
And I think that's when you went into your, I'm going to cope with things the way I know how to cope with things, and you kind of just left me alone. And not in like a bad way, but just as in like, okay, I'm going to give you space to deal with your emotions.
Yeah, exactly.
And for me, I realised very quickly that is not what I need.
Yeah.
But then I didn't know what I was like, I didn't want to feel like smothered, but I also didn't want to feel isolated. And trying to explain that is so difficult when you don't even know what it is that you need.
Yeah.
And that was just a real kind of like navigational roller coaster for us, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was pretty mad. I mean, we'd never been through anything that extreme before together. So I think any sort of differences in the way that we tend to deal with really emotional problems were just plain as day.
Yeah.
You know, when I've ever been in a situation like that, when I've been really emotional or it's been loss or something, I want to just be left alone. And I feel like if people were trying to give me attention all the time and being like, oh, I'm here for you and blah, blah, it's nice, but I don't want it. I just want you to go away. Like, leave me to just feel terrible on my own almost. And that's probably not a good way to deal with things, but it's just how I deal with things. Yeah. And, you know, if I started to feel like you were smothering me in a way, I think that'd just be really difficult and I'd push you off.
Yeah.
And I think you probably try and give the support that you want to receive yourself.
Yeah.
And so me thinking, what would I least, you know, what wouldn't work for me in this situation is smothering you with attention, or being smothered with attention, I should say. So I like step back, and my sort of approach to it was sort of, I am here for you, whatever you need, but I didn't go to you maybe as much as you would have wanted me to in that situation, and bring the attention to you. I almost sort of sat back and waited to do what you wanted me to do, which I think is what I need. Yeah. But that's not what you need.
Yeah, exactly.
As we found out, it wasn't the best way to deal with it for you.
Yeah.
So.
But even then, I mean, it took I think even like 6 months or something for us to be able to kind of navigate that period, because I had no idea how to deal with it. And it kind of got to a point where like someone was trying to help me this way, someone was trying to help me this way, and like none of these things felt right, but I couldn't say why. And it was only really, I think we got to a point where we ended up just sitting down and talking for like about 4 hours, didn't we? And that was almost the absolute saving grace of the whole scenario, because it was the first time where we'd opened up that platform to just openly talk. And you talked about how you felt that I'd pushed you away by telling you that you'd done things wrong. And I talked about how I felt that you hadn't done something or whatever. And it was not in it wasn't like a blameful conversation, but it was like, okay, I know now that this wasn't what I needed, and this is why, because this is how it made me feel. It wasn't blameful, and I think that's the key point there, is when you're trying to communicate difficult things, try not to make it blameful. Yeah. And make it constructive in, okay, I know you tried to do this, but this might work for you, but this, I realise now, doesn't work for me.
Yeah, and that's probably a wider point that we'll get onto maybe in a bit more detail later on, but I think not taking things personally is an enormous part of any kind of communication like this. And I'll admit, I didn't necessarily do that at first, because, you know, it's a wider issue with grief as a whole. You know, it's a horrific emotion that unfortunately everybody will have to feel at some point. And there's no right or wrong way. I don't think you can fully prepare for that at all, or deal with it perfectly. You know, it's messy. But maybe at first, where I felt like I was trying to help you as best I could and it wasn't working for you, and you weren't pushing me away, but I don't know, I felt like it wasn't working, and I felt that you were almost dissatisfied with how I'd helped or tried to help. And part of me almost like that upset me in a way, because I thought, why are you getting frustrated at me? I'm just trying to help. And that was me taking it personally when I really shouldn't have, because you were feeling really intense, awful emotions.
But it's easily done. It's easily done because it's like you say, if you in your head you know how you want to be helped, and you then give that help to someone, you really feel like you're doing a
Yeah.
good deed. And if that good deed gets rejected or criticised, you, I guess, just instinctively as a human, you just go into like defense mode, and you're like, well, I really was trying, like, why
Yeah.
don't you appreciate this?
Yeah, you almost feel it as like a personal attack, that like
Yeah.
the way you did that was wrong,
Yeah.
and I am annoyed at you for it. And that's not what it was at all.
Yeah.
At all.
And I think, and again, that comes down to, well, as we've learned now, how you communicate that. It's not that you did this wrong, it was just this didn't work for me, and although I don't know what might work, let's try doing something else,
Yeah.
and if that doesn't work, then we'll try something else.
Yeah. And I think when we sat down and had that really long conversation, we both like almost put our egos aside and said, what do you need?
Yeah.
Or we sort of said, this is how I'm trying to help.
Yeah.
Clearly bits of it are working, bits of it aren't. Which bits
Yeah.
are working, which bits aren't. What do you need? And we just had a really candid, almost business-like discussion.
I know.
It's
it was
a
also the-
scientific discussion of what
Yeah.
exactly do I need to do.
But it was the first time as well that we'd listened to each other, because I think we'd both
Yeah.
been trying to talk at each other,
Yeah.
but we'd never actually listened. And when I was like listening to you talk about how something had made you feel, I kind of, tore away from my ego for that moment, where I was like, okay, well, this is what I was trying to do. And suddenly I was actually like, oh, this is the consequence that I didn't consider. When you imagine doing something with someone to help them or whatever, you almost imagine up a whole scenario in your head of what's going to happen. Like, if I tell this person they're going to be okay, they're going to go, oh, great, thank you. You maybe not that, but you imagine a scenario of how things are going to pan out.
Yeah.
And you don't factor in that other people behave differently to you
Yeah,
and react
exactly.
differently to you. And it's only sitting down and listening, like really listening to someone, that you realise that all of these scenarios that you invented are really only your own, and they're not really going to happen with anyone else in the world, because not everyone is the same as you.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the difference between thinking you're being empathetic and truly being empathetic with somebody. Because, like you said, I could think, okay, I know how she's feeling in this situation, and I will invent how I think you feel. That will absolutely not be right. It will never be right. And then I think, okay, if I'm feeling that, what do I need? And then I try and give you that.
Yeah.
And then I think, if I give you that, you will feel this way.
Yeah.
And all of those things are based on loads of assumptions, which are always wrong. And I think that's true for any people in any situation. So that's the sort of surface level trying to be empathetic. And then what we did was sat down and had a real candid discussion about exactly how we feel. And like I said, it took ages. And those conversations, they're not nice to have. They're a bit
I know,
awkward.
I think we cried probably for most of it.
It was awkward and horrible, and you just think, oh, this is awful, and it feels terrible. But then 10-15 minutes in, you just sort of get into a flow of
Yeah.
it.
And now
we can do that about anything now.
Yeah. And I always thought we communicated well before. I always thought we did, but it's only since having that massive discussion
Yeah.
that now we are entirely different in how we communicate.
I think we always did communicate well, but for certain very extreme scenarios, it was probably not deep enough.
Yeah.
And then we've sort of unlocked that. And the good thing, we can use that for everything now.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean if we're trying to decide what to have for, tea, we need to have a 3-hour philosophical discussion about, what to do. But we have that option, at least.
Yeah.
And I think it sort of flows through into all the other discussions that we have as well. If we are discussing something much more trivial, we are much more empathetic with each other and try and see things from each other's point of view a bit better.
Yeah, we do. So for the people who haven't had the opportunity to have a big discussion like what we have managed to have, and they're still struggling in terms of like, how can I approach this with my partner? You don't necessarily need to sit and go, we need to talk straight away,
That's
because that
awful,
doesn't
yeah.
that doesn't work for everyone.
Nobody wants that.
Well, what you can do is maybe drop them a message. If you don't do face-to-face, if that's hard for you, drop them a message and just say, I'm feeling a bit low today. and leave it at that if that's all you feel comfortable doing. Or go into depth and just say, I think this is how I'm feeling, I think this might be why. And again, make sure that it's not blameful, and then have that as like the opening point for a real conversation later. If you struggle to initiate a difficult conversation, maybe just drop the hint of like, just feeling a little bit low, and open that door to have that wider conversation.
Yeah, I think for us, the example we were talking about, there was a very extreme scenario which like catalysed that conversation for us. But I think, if you, in absence of that, you can just say, little and often.
Yeah.
Try and raise things in a slightly deeper way.
Yeah.
Rather than just, I think what a lot of people do, and I think everyone's guilty of this sometimes, is say they've got a problem in their relationship or their partner's annoying them about something, and they just hold it internally.
Yeah.
And they never talk about it because, the discussions are awkward and horrible and nobody wants to have them. But what happens is that will just turn into resentment, and it will turn into eye rolls and things like that, and you'll start to just not like the person that you're with.
Yeah.
And then, you'll have all this resentment. They'll do one more thing, I don't know, won't put the plates in the dishwasher or something, and all this emotion will come out, which will feel completely justified because it's 10 years worth of emotion, and they'll think, what the hell, it's just a plate. And like, that's it. And that's, I think, how most, can't speak for everyone obviously, but a lot of petty arguments that people have are like that.
Yeah.
And I think, you just sort of have to recognise that may happen if we don't have these slightly awkward, difficult conversations.
Yeah.
And they're only awkward and difficult for the first couple of times.
Yeah, well, exactly. And the more you say to your partner, I'm struggling with this, like even just dropping it into little bits of conversation, the more you do it, the more normal it will start to become, and the easier it will feel to be able to say it. The first time you say it, you might be like, your heart might be pounding in your chest. But then if you do it a second time, you're like, okay, I'll think back to how I did it the first time, and if they picked up on it straight away or they didn't pick up on it, then I'll learn from that and I'll do it slightly differently this time, or whatever.
Yeah.
And so naturally it becomes more comfortable to do that.
Yeah. And I think also you probably have to just be quite patient as well.
Yeah.
And recognise that, your partner is absolutely not a perfect person, but neither are you. Like, neither of you are, and it will take some getting used to. I think what most people have is an idea in their head, like we just talked about, how their partner should react to what they do, and chances are that won't happen, and you can't blame them necessarily, but you can train them up, because at the end of it, as weird as it sounds, you do need to train the person that you're with to react with you or speak to you and deal with you the way that you need to be dealt with.
Yeah.
You can't just necessarily expect them to come into your life, solve every problem and be perfect in every situation. It won't happen.
Yeah.
You're different people.
And that's where I think I'm going to call it a coping language. That's where that comes in, and having the understanding that if you ask your partner, okay, well, what if this happened to you? How would you want to cope with that? And they say, I think I just want to be left alone. And remember that. And next time they're feeling really rubbish, just give them space. And if then there's a bit of friction, then you know that that's not the right thing, and ask them what is the right thing. But if you have that understanding, if you say to your partner, okay, just tell me how you think you deal with things, and then I can at least try and do that rather than doing what I think is right. Yeah,
and don't also put pressure on yourself to have all the answers. Like, ask them, what should I do? And I think we spoke about this the other day actually, if we're talking about any problem, I will literally sometimes say, I am going into problem solving mode here. Do you want me to problem solve, or do you just want me to listen? Because I think sometimes that's my instinct, is you'll say, here's a bunch of issues, and I'm like, right, how do we fix this problem? And I think sometimes me doing that and proposing solutions to things, and
to
almost,
me that overwhelms
exactly,
me.
it adds so much more complexity, because it's not just the problems, it's a million different ways we can fix them, and then you just think,
exactly.
oh, I can't deal with all of this.
Like this happened,
Leave me
I think,
alone.
this happened just a few weeks ago when we were talking about work and like a difficult time at work. And I think when you have like a problem at work, I guess your brain goes into, I'm gonna mind map this and do like, okay, here's the problem, here's a solution, here's a solution, here's a solution. And yet when I approached you the other day about being stressed at work, you sat down and you were like, okay, we're going to do a plan. And I was like, I'm already drowning in plans. I don't need more plans.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But also, I think you touched on a good point just a little minute ago, so I'm going to rewind a little bit. And the key word for me was ask. Ask your partner. If you don't want to initiate a conversation to say that you're feeling rubbish, ask your partner something, and then it's not a blameful thing, because then you're engaging a conversation. It's another way around a difficult thing, you know, instead of just saying, like, I feel bad because you didn't do this, or I feel bad because this isn't working, or whatever. Just say, how do you feel about this? Or can we have a hug and just have a moment of peace together? Or just, can we? Or have we? Or do, like, ask.
Yeah.
That's a good way around having a difficult
Yeah.
starting point.
Yeah. I mean, you can ask the person what they need, but also if you have the problem and they're unaware and they're just, you know, getting on with their day, you can go up to them and say, I need to just, you know, have a hug, or I need to talk at you for 10 minutes, don't say anything, and then I'll leave you alone.
Yeah.
That's the way I am with things.
Yeah.
Like, if I probably think very extrovertedly, I think. So sometimes I've actually come into you before when you've been sat in the dining room, and I will just start giving a speech almost about all of the things that are
It's
in
a
my head.
regular occurrence.
It happens too
you
much.
just need someone to talk
I
at.
do, yeah. And I pace. I just walk around the dining room table talking out loud, and you can literally not say a thing.
I think, to
and
be
I'll
honest,
just be like,
I zone out
"Nice
most
one."
of the time,
I-
and you don't even care.
I would recommend that you zone out, because you can't. It's not that you can't help. It's I don't need you to help in that
Yeah,
situation.
you
I
just need to
just
get it out.
need to speak.
Yeah.
And for some reason, it helps when you're there.
And just one final point on initiating conversations. We'll touch on the feelings you have when you're doing that, or why you're not doing it. Because for me, prior to us ever having this really good level of communication, my biggest fear, and still is really, is confrontation. And I think in my head, whenever I had an issue that I wanted to talk to you about, my brain would spiral from, he's not going to like listening to what I've got to say, to he's going to hate me, to we're splitting up. And in my head, we were already splitting up whenever I needed to talk to you about anything.
Yeah.
How do you break that down from thinking the worst scenario, you know, because I think everyone hates having difficult conversations, but breaking out of that mindset of, oh, if I talk about this, we're just going to break up. Like, you know, that's really difficult, because
Yeah.
not every problem is a splitting up problem.
Almost none. Well,
almost
most
none.
problems aren't. You know, I think that's
Maybe breaking down the problem into smaller chunks instead of like, it's like, I guess
Yeah.
it's like you said before, of if someone doesn't put the plate in the dishwasher and suddenly you're spouting out 10 years of what you think is justified
yeah.
argument. Having the little tiny chunks, mentioning them into conversation that are easier, and then it doesn't feel like confrontation.
Yeah.
Then it's just like a little nudge.
Like, I think if you've got a scenario in your head that this problem is so big that it's going to destroy the relationship,
Yeah.
you've let it get too big yourself.
Yeah.
Like, you have to take some responsibility for
You're
that
right.
feeling. You can't just look at your partner and say, they're awful and I can't talk to them. Like,
Yeah.
if it, you know, so maybe the solution is to either prevention's better than cure. If there's a little problem, discuss it sooner rather than later. But if it feels enormous, just, you know, it takes a lot of self-control, but let it out bit by bit.
Yeah.
You know, what you maybe need to do in that situation is break the problem down or introduce it piece by piece.
Yeah.
If you've got this enormous amount of resentment and anger built up, you do just need to, you know, maybe sleep on it and
Yeah.
talk in chunks, basically.
Yeah.
Raise it a little bit at a time and slowly chip away at it. Don't just try and blow the whole thing in one go, because you'll get very angry and upset, probably forget everything that you wanted to say,
Yeah.
this perfect argument you've got in your head.
Yeah.
They won't react the way you want them to react. They'll feel annoyed and attacked. You'll both be angry,
Yeah.
and it'll be worse. And then
Yeah.
you'll think, oh, I can't speak to them about things. And it's not
Mhm.
necessarily their fault. That a lot of that, you have to look internally and say, I did not approach that situation properly.
Yeah, and again, approaching it, I think the only thing that I keep coming back to is approaching it in a non-blameful way, because I think that is really easily done when you have a big problem that you want to talk about.
Yeah.
And for example, if you want to do all of these things with your partner, but your partner doesn't enjoy doing those things, and so you end up doing those things alone, instead of then going to your partner and being like, well, I don't feel like you're supporting me in this, or you don't want to be there for me when I'm there for you, and that sounds blameful. If you, you know, but if you approach that as like, can you tell me why you don't want to do these things? Let them have the floor to just talk and then listen.
Yeah.
Don't just ask something and then use that as fuel to be more angry. Like, just listen and try and tweak your perspective in order to understand how this scenario has made that person feel.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I don't want to get too philosophical about it maybe, but it's a wider problem with just human beings in general. You know, if we're feeling negative emotion, it's very easy to just pin all of that on an external source, whether that's your partner or an event or whatever, because then you don't have to do that awkward, horrible, stressful, time-consuming introspection and think, how could I be better as a person? And I'm not saying, you know, there are people out there who have terrible relationships where their partners are manipulative and awful, and I don't want people to necessarily think I'm suggesting every problem you have you've created. I'm not trying to gaslight everyone, but there is, you know, you can't control how your partner responds to things directly, but you can maybe indirectly influence that by controlling how you raise the problems and, you know, having better control of your own emotions maybe.
Yeah.
There's a lot more that people can do to control the situations than maybe they think. And I think most people get to the point, like I said, they're very resentful and they feel powerless. Yeah. And then it all comes out in a big emotional outburst. Yeah. And that didn't have to happen. Yeah. Try and maybe be a bit more aware of that.
Mm-hmm. Or how can we navigate that? Like, this is my way of coping. Can you help me on this journey? I guess telling someone how you want to cope with something is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about talking about how you need emotional support, what kind they can offer in a way, and trying to find like a good middle somewhere that works for both of you. Yeah.
So this flows quite nicely into our next poll. And the question I asked everyone was this: do you feel as though you can have constructive disagreements with your partner? And the options were: yes, we communicate well and work through problems, sometimes, and no, they can be destructive with little resolution. 43% said yes, we communicate well and work through problems, which is really good.
It's good, but it's still less than half.
It's still less than half. 46% said sometimes. So, again, it's positive, but I think there's still that... I don't know whether a lot of that still then comes back to, are we feeling as though we're blaming the other person and then that is causing anger? Or are we not getting to the root of the problem? And then 11% said no, they can be destructive with little resolution, and that's really sad.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
That's really sad.
That's, you know, two people just clashing heads and not resolving anything. Yeah. That's probably linking back to what we have just been talking about. Two people who have completely different ideas of what each other needs, what they want from, you know, these discussions. And, you know, what we're not saying that every problem can have a magical rainbow solution where you're both happy and, you know, skip off into the sunset. Like, life is difficult, relationships are difficult. You will never see eye to eye 100% of the time. But, you know, I think the vast majority of people almost think my partner should be able to perfectly fix everything I have, or know how I should act, or act how I want them to act all the time with no effort from me. And it's like, that's a pretty steep ask that you never verbalize. You never say that to them. And
that is something that evolves over time as well, because we've been together years, and even now we're still learning about each other when we face a difficult situation.
You always will, because you change, you know, like things that work in the past might not work in the future. Like at the moment, we were talking before, I like just being left alone, or I almost want you to just sit there and let me talk at you. And it's nice if we, you know, talk together, but sometimes I need to just brain dump and then I find the solutions that I need just by speaking it out loud. But that might be completely different in the future.
Yeah,
I might
exactly.
just need
and
physical like support. Like I just want to give you a hug,
Exactly.
and that'd be it.
So you could be a talker in how you deal with normal things, but then if something really emotional crops up, you might find that you really need emotional support.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
don't just need a listener, you just need company.
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
need a presence.
Yeah, exactly. And so, in the same way that people change, you know, people are encountering new situations all the time as well. Grieving one person is not the same as maybe grieving another person, or
Yeah,
you'll be in a different place mentally at the time, and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's probably important to stress that we're not necessarily suggesting that you do these sorts of conversations, work out what your partner needs, and that's a template you can apply to every situation for the rest of your time together. It's more the process of how do we talk about what each other needs.
Yeah.
That will be timeless, and if you can kind of perfect that, then you'll still have arguments and you'll still disagree on things and feel bad, but it will be far more constructive, or the time between problem and resolution will be hopefully a lot shorter.
Yeah. Okay, so I think this is a good point in the discussion to kind of move on to particular things that crop up in difficult conversations. And so I put a poll out to kind of get an idea of what people mostly find difficult within their relationship.
Okay.
I asked everybody, what is the most difficult topic to discuss with your partner? So I gave the options of finance, jealousy, life goals, and then other/none. And then an option for people to, specify if they selected other. And 47%, the highest scoring point, was finance.
Okay, that's not surprising.
Yeah, we'll go into a little bit more depth, I think, shortly. But we then had jealousy came in at 23%, life goals at 7%, and other/none at 23%.
Okay.
And I'll just run through a couple of the other things that people sent in. And some of them were work issues, chores, and family planning. So there's a whole wide range of topics here. But we'll start with finance. 47% of people have said that finance is a heated topic within their relationship.
The fact that that is a big problem, I think, reveals that reason finance is a big deal is people are very insecure about it. Across the board. We don't have a very good culture in the UK when it comes to finances. If you find out your friend is earning more than you for a similar job or a different job or whatever, or people are in a better financial situation, people are really, I think, quite prone in our culture to envy and jealousy and things like that. And I can't speak for everybody, but we don't talk about finances openly in the UK at all. And so it's a shame because it affects everybody. It's important for everybody by default, and people just don't feel like they can talk about it because it makes them feel insecure or uneasy. And if you've got two people who are insecure about it trying to discuss one of their biggest insecurities together, it's going to cause problems.
It's just being open about not just what you're earning, but what you're spending. And if you're being accused of you're spending too much on clothes, you're spending too much on lottery, gambling, whatever, again, it's approaching that in a non-blameful way, but asking perhaps your partner, can you see things from my perspective as to I think these things are a priority. Why do you think these things are more of a priority? And I guess that's maybe where it comes down to is a misalignment in priorities, because some people might like the entertainment and leisure kind of lifestyle, whereas other people are solid savers and I want this big house eventually.
And I think a good way to approach that problem is not to... What a lot of people will maybe do is they will, almost like a detective, compile evidence, you spent this amount on this and this amount on this, and then they'll go to them and just accuse them outright of all this terrible behaviour, and that person will immediately go defensive, shut down, I don't want to talk about it, leave me alone, and you won't get anywhere. I think instead the way to maybe approach financial things, and this applies to a lot of things, is... do it from because that's a very negative way to do it. If you do it from a positive way, we want to go on holiday next year to this place, we need to save up this amount. How can we work to grow our savings to this amount together? don't necessarily, tell them what to do. Just say, have a think. Where could you, I don't know, cut back, or what could you do to maybe earn more money or something like that, or go for promotion or things. I think if you go at things from a positive spin instead, people get inspired about that and they get excited and think, oh, I can do more, I can achieve something, rather than you've done everything wrong and I hate you for it and you're an issue. That doesn't work.
No, it's a really, really good point. I actually really like that idea of approaching something with like a positive outlook, and then like, how can we achieve this together?
There's a good quote that I really love, which is, what you aim at determines what you see. And I think if you're aiming to save money for a reason, I don't know, say you were going to go and buy, I don't know, have a McDonald's that evening or something, and you think, oh, that's, 10, 15 quid that I could put towards our holiday. It's so much easier to say no to the McDonald's in that situation than it's just, oh, my partner told me to stop doing this. And then that chimp brain inside you goes, don't tell me what to do. I'll have 10 McDonald's this week.
In terms of if you're both earning two different wages, and then maybe you've got the battle of bills and who pays more on bills and stuff, that could also be a point of friction within the relationship. And if someone's very independent but maybe they're not earning as much as their partner, it can feel quite difficult if their partner's going, it's okay, I want to spend more on the bills because you don't earn as much, because that then makes you feel a little bit like, oh, well, now I feel a bit rubbish.
Yeah, so I think
and probably maybe even vice versa. If someone is like, well, I don't want to put like 10 grand towards something if you're only putting one.
Yeah, person A might say, I'm earning 60% more, I'll pay 60% more of the bills. And that is a nice, fair thing to do. But then person B is like, I don't want charity, I can look after myself, I don't need that necessarily. And they'll be grateful for it on the one hand, but maybe a little, not resentful, but feel a little put down by it on the other hand.
And then I think it's finding that
tricky
compromise, isn't it? Because then, it's approaching that then with a positive thing, being like, well, if we do this, we've then both got the same amount to then spend on entertainment and leisure and life, and as opposed to one of us having less and one of us having more, and then that counterbalance forever growing.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately it is just one of those awkward conversations that nobody wants to have, and they feel very horrible to do.
But once you have it once, it's done.
Have it the one time if you can. Try and come to some sort of resolution.
Yeah, just having that open platform of knowing what your partner, like what their financial priorities are, and then trying to establish what it is in the relationship.
Yeah, it can be really difficult. Say if you're person B and you're earning much less than your partner, going up to them and necessarily saying, I don't want to pay as much of the bills as you, is another very difficult thing to do. I would really struggle to do that.
And then I think also, if you've come into a new relationship, say, and your partner is very much in debt, and they've brought that into the relationship, that I imagine is a very big added struggle, because then that other person now is carrying that burden, or even that other person's habit, if this is still like an ongoing thing, like a gambling problem or a spending problem or something like that. And so again, it's how you have that conversation of, let's just evaluate what our priorities are, what we want out of this relationship, what we want to achieve together.
Yeah.
And I guess, saying, well, we could go on a nice holiday next year, but we don't want to come back in more debt. It's how you approach that, because it's a difficult one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, financial troubles are some of the worst things that people go through. And unfortunately, I think it goes back to the culture of not talking about it in the UK. If you do not talk about it, if you don't rule your finances, they will rule you. And you kind of just have to accept that painful fact. If you don't get on top of it, and if you don't work together to solve it, you'll always be, chasing your tail. You'll always have these problems, and they'll never be resolved. So it's difficult. It feels awkward and horrible, and makes you feel bad, and it'll be emotional maybe to really just attack these problems together. But sort of like everything that we previously said, go at it maybe from a positive spin instead. So you're working towards something rather than just running away from something. And maybe have this conversation incrementally. Like, don't think today's the day I'm going to solve all of our problems for the future. Go to your partner, I don't know, they're tired, they're in a bad mood, start attacking them, and then nothing happens. It's how you approach it. but make sure you do approach it, I think.
Once you know what the situation is, it's no issue to say, oh, I earned this much this month, or I'm sorry, I spent more than I should have this month. But you've talked about it once. It just makes it easier that second time round.
And I think prepare the conversation as well. So if you go and just start talking about it, maybe your partner doesn't feel like you should need to talk about it or doesn't see it as an issue, maybe try and get them around to your way of thinking a bit more, or at least put your ideas across as this is why we need to look at this in the first place, and hopefully try and get them on side to that. And again, don't necessarily do it from a negative perspective. Don't say we need to talk about finances because you're terrible with money, because they'll just go, oh well, screw you, I'm not talking to you then. If you say I'd like to talk about finances or something like that, because it would be cool to be able to go on, I don't know, 2 holidays next year and not worry about it. Let's try and go after it almost like a predatory way, like how can we capture this and work on this together and achieve something. But it definitely works on me, you know. If we're ever having any discussion about anything, if you were to come to me with the problem from what you're doing is wrong and you have a problem and you need to fix the problem, that would not work on me, because I would just think, what you talk about, like, don't
this makes me think of a conversation we had like ages ago now, where you were like, if you ever need something doing, compliment me first.
Oh yeah.
Because if I was like, could you put this shelf up because I don't want to, and you go, no, I don't want to if you don't want to do it. But if I go, can I use your nice muscly arms to put this shelf up, and you'll go, yes, I can do the shelf.
Every time it's 100% efficient. Yeah, it absolutely works. I do it to you as well. I'm probably going to do it later, right? We've got some Christmas presents and we need to wrap, and I know I'm going to say to you, oh babe, can you please, like, you're really good at, because you are very creative, you're really good at like crafty stuff. I will find a way of asking you to wrap the presents for me and you'll do a great job. Far better than I would have done. But I'll ask it in a nice way. I won't just say, wrap my presents for me.
You're right, it works. It's annoying.
It does.
Okay, moving on to jealousy. That can be a really toxic thing if it's not addressed. I think with jealousy is one of the biggest points in where I think jealousy stems from a key moment in someone's life. Because no one is born envious. It's how you are raised, it's how you're treated, it's what you are given, it's what is taken away from you. It's all of those things that happen in your life are factored into how jealous you get over a situation. And I think if you have a partner that doesn't like you going out with male friends, ask why, address it. You might find out that your partner was cheated on in a previous relationship and they've never told you that. And even if they have told you that and you don't want to be blamed for the ex's problem, just have that conversation of like, okay, well, how can we navigate this so that we can both have security and peace?
I think in my experience, the relationships we're very lucky in that jealousy is almost doesn't exist in our relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a human emotion that everybody can feel, everybody will feel at some point. But in my experience anyway, the most jealous people I've ever been with are always people with deep insecurities. And I'm not attacking people who feel jealousy. I have felt jealousy in the past.
Yeah.
The majority of the time, it comes from within. It comes from some sort of feeling of, if you're jealous of somebody else your partner's, I don't know, speaking to or something like that, it's because in one way or another you maybe see that person as some sort of a threat. And that's not a nice thing to imagine, because you want to think, oh well, they're acting like that and that's annoying me and they are in the wrong and it's not my fault. But that person, you are giving them some sort of power over you by feeling like that. And maybe that's a conversation to have with your partner about what those insecurities are and what they can do to maybe make you feel a bit better about that. Yeah, there are some people who actively try and make their partners feel jealous. And I have been with people like that in the past. And they are not very nice people to be with. Often I found that annoying because I thought, why are you trying to make me feel bad? And that was what used to frustrate me about it, rather than actually feeling jealous. Jealousy usually stems from some sort of, like I said, bad past experience, or from personal insecurities. You feel like maybe you got really lucky with your partner and so it's only a matter of time till somebody steals them off you. And so I think that maybe in that situation, work on improving yourself.
It can also stem from how you are treated by your partner in terms of how much affection you're getting or how much attention you're getting.
That's very true. There are two big sides of it, to be
Yeah,
fair. I think
yeah.
there is an internal side, but like I said, there's absolutely an external side as well.
Yeah, because if I think of a previous relationship where I think jealousy was probably like a very, very toxic thing in that relationship, the reason was never that like I didn't feel good enough, but I think that stems from my partner's behaviour.
They elicit insecurities in you,
Yes.
and they form the base for that jealousy. Because then you think, oh wait, maybe I'm not good enough for this person.
Yeah, and it's the behaviour of your partner, like if they're hiding things from you, that like, you don't need to know my business. Like if someone is very, very defensive, suddenly you're going to be distrustful. And you can't help that. It's like almost a defense mechanism again, isn't it? Like what we talked about before. If someone is telling you not to do something, your instinct goes, I want to do it. And I think maybe jealousy can then kind of snowball from that, in that if you're not getting 100% of your partner's attention, who is?
I get that, but... And that is absolutely true. So it's not always necessarily background things that you've had in the past or how you're necessarily feeling. Like the way your partner acts can really create new worries for you. Absolutely. And you know, some people are just mean. Like they'll actively attack aspects of your personality or how you look or something like that. And then, you know, behave like that and you think, oh God, this person doesn't like me anymore.
Yeah.
But I do think that all of it has to first make you feel personally insecure before it has any real power over how you feel.
I feel like with us, if you were to go off and talk with every other girl in the world, I wouldn't feel bothered at all.
Yeah, I know.
But I think that's probably because
You're
we
confident
have
in
a very...
yourself.
Yeah,
for
and we
one.
also know what we want from each other. Like, you give me the love and attention that I need in a relationship. In the previous relationship, I wasn't getting that. So I wasn't satisfied in any element of that relationship.
Like you feel secure because we have a strong relationship.
Yeah.
So you know that that wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, I want to also then refer back to the whole love languages thing, because then it comes back to how you give love and how you receive love, as that will also play a big part in your security in that relationship. Because if you are a words of affection person, for example, like you like to be told, oh, you're pretty, or I really love you, or whatever, and your partner isn't saying that, but then you hear your partner saying nice things to other people.
Yeah.
Then talk to your partner about that and say, okay, I really appreciate it when you tell me nice things about me. And encourage that. And then suddenly, if your partner is telling you lots of nice things about your trust issues can somehow magically like disappear, or they can grow a bit, you know.
It's like we spoke about earlier. You need to train them up to fit what you need.
Yeah.
But again, I do think that having self-assurance and self-confidence is the easiest thing that you can actively work on that will be good for all points of your life.
It
but
is, and
especially
also
jealousy.
with your partner, talking to your partner about what you expect in a relationship, and what if you feel like something is missing, then what, and how can we fix this together?
Yeah, and we are really good at that, I think. Jealousy never really comes up in our relationship because I think of just how we act with each other about things.
Well, that's what I mean, and I think again that's like the love languages thing, because you know what I appreciate, and that's how we bounce off each other. Like we show each other love in action, words, service, every kind of thing that you want or you need in a relationship. But if I wasn't getting even one of the things that I wanted, but you were doing that to other people, that is a big trigger point.
Yeah.
And you can be as self-confident as anyone, you know, you could be really, really self-assured and arrogant to the point of, but if your partner is saying something nice to someone else and they're never saying something nice to you, that will play a role. You can appreciate yourself as much as you want, but if you tell your partner what you want and what you need, you both have that foundation of, okay, I know I need to give this kind of love to my partner. It does help to kind of wean off that jealousy.
Yeah, like a lot of the confidence that you can have in a relationship will come from how your partner acts around you as well. But at the same time, there are people out there who are incredibly manipulative and controlling people.
There are, but then why?
Yeah,
I think
again,
that comes
it comes down
to
to insecurities that they have, and they project that onto you.
And that's where you need to talk and just
be
open, I think.
Yeah, because you can try and help them with those insecurities, but some people, from personal experience, nothing you can possibly do will ever stop them being like that. There are some people who are just very jealous people.
But then that's just a different kind. Like, you meet different types of people in your life, and sometimes you're not going to get on with all of the people that you encounter, and you might just be two very different people, and it might, no one wants to hear it, but it might just be that you're just not the right fit.
Yeah.
If, like you say, it's got to the point where it is manipulative and it is toxic, and you've really tried to uncover what the trigger points are, and there's been no progress made.
It's probably quite a much deeper thing we could talk about a lot, but I think if you have genuinely really tried to fix the situation, you feel like you're doing everything, you're trying to be open, and you're getting nowhere, partner's not listening to you at all, they're getting worse, not better, you're feeling awful, you start blaming yourself. Sometimes you do just have to think, okay, this person is not working for me, and you have to, again, I think this does come back to self-confidence. Have the self-confidence to just walk away, you know. So that's probably a bigger conversation. But don't be afraid, I would say, of walking out of bad relationships. Lots of people stay in bad relationships, and I feel like I keep circling back to this point. I think it comes from they are insecure and think I won't get anything better. If I break up with this person, even though I'm miserable, I'll be alone forever, which is worse. And, you know, one, I would say that's not true, that it's worse to be alone. And two, who's to say you won't meet a far better person? But the flip side of that is I don't think it's necessarily good to think grass is always greener, and the second you have problems, run. That's not the best way to do things. If you have worked at it genuinely and you can hold your hands up and say, I've tried everything, they are making me miserable, you know, nothing is working, maybe you do need to leave.
Okay, so next we're going to move on to life goals. And I'm also going to factor in one of the other specifications that someone sent in, which is family planning, because I think somewhere they kind of align. Because, well, life goals can encompass like a whole range of things, and that is children, marriage, it could be where you want to live in the future, it could be career goals, it could be a whole wide range of things. You know, if somebody is very career driven and they want to keep earning promotions and get the highest paid job, whereas someone is quite like a free soul and just wants to travel the planet and never settle and stuff like that, they are two very different entities. And again, like if somebody wants children and the other person doesn't want children, they're very, very difficult things to navigate. And the fact that 7% of people are trying to navigate these things, that's very difficult. And especially because it's not an easy compromise as well. Big things like kids, if someone doesn't want kids and someone does, how do you compromise on that?
It's really difficult if you don't agree on those.
Yeah.
You know, if one person wants kids and one person doesn't, that alone could be enough to essentially doom a relationship. You know, in the nicest way.
Okay, so for things that aren't like kids or whatever, again, it's how you communicate these issues. So for example, I don't know, if we want to say that somebody has a life goal that they want to stay in the hometown that they grew up in. They love it here, they want to live here, whereas somebody else wants to move away or something like that. It's how you approach navigating that, and listen to what your partner wants and don't disregard it. You can even live abroad for like a month or 2 months or something like that.
Yeah.
But just listen to what your partner wants, and if they're really, really miserable staying where they live, then what solutions are available?
Yeah, I think any kind of clash on these points immediately gets people's backs up, because they are seen as mutually exclusive, and they don't necessarily have to be. Like the point you just made there is really good. If someone wants to travel around, maybe they just set themselves not a goal, but they go and, I don't know, live in Italy for a month of the year or something like that. And that's like a compromise. Or maybe it's not just easy to do this, but had a holiday home somewhere and spent some time there and stuff. There are maybe ways that you can work around certain things like that, rather than thinking, you know, it's one or the other.
Yeah.
You might be able to compromise on certain things. They're normally quite immune to compromise major life goals, like having kids. You know, you can't halfway have a child. Doesn't happen, doesn't work.
Or even having kids at different ages. Like if someone wants to be a young parent and the other person wants to, say, achieve all that they can in their career, before having kids. Again, it's that compromise of which part of your career can you get to where you have the stability enough to be able to raise a child, you know, and you can still progress with your career. Because if you're just starting out in your career and you've got a lot of headway to make in order to get to like a really established good wage or position or whatever, then you're really going to want to focus on that, or you're going to want to earn the qualifications or whatever. But if somebody really wants to have a child before they're 30, it's that conversation of, okay, we've both got priorities here and they're both very big priorities, so how can we factor both in to the point where, like, okay, we both have stability, we both have a good wage at this point in our lives. I'm not going to be like an old parent, or you're not going to be struggling with your job, whatever. You know, you've got some kind of middle ground of compromise in the, yeah, you might not have achieved like your top promotion, but at this point you've got enough coming in and enough stability that it will allow you to raise a child while you can still progress.
Yeah,
you know?
it is a case of having that kind of conversation, because let's take that exact example. I think if someone is career driven and not children driven, but they would have kids in the future, that person will never think it's a good time to have kids. The kids will always feel like an obstacle, and it'll be, oh well, 1 more year and this will happen, or 2 more years and I'll get to this position and stuff like that. And vice versa on the person who wants to have the children younger. The years will maybe start to tick by, and that person will get increasingly frustrated and annoyed and resentful, and then they'll be like, okay, we either have kids like now or I'm gonna have to leave. And I think that again is, they've both not addressed that properly.
Communicated it,
Back to what we were saying, you need to have a candid conversation about that sort of stuff. And like you said, think about where do you actually want to go, or at what point would you be happy maybe having the kids, if the answer hopefully won't just be never.
Exactly. It's like, where would you be willing to compromise? Because not everything can be set in stone.
It is a question, like I said, of just thinking about it openly. Because, you know, we're both very career driven. I think if left to our own devices almost, and if we just never had the when are we having kids conversation, we could quite easily probably go for quite a while and just keep thinking, oh well, they'll just be annoying, so they'll get in the way, we'll just, you know, maybe leave it. But we've had that conversation a lot. And we are very in sync now with where we
and I think now we're both in like the let's push and push and push and push and push until a year, 2 years time, and then we're going to go, okay, this is where we're going to rest at.
Yeah, exactly. And by having that conversation, it has actually really helped me think about what I should be doing in my career. Should I just absolutely hammer it for a while? Up until this point, and then maybe, you know, sit in that place for a bit longer and stuff like that. It's been really useful. We are lucky in the sense that we do both want to have kids, and we're both career driven, so we've been able to have a really open discussion about that, which has been really helpful. For people who maybe it's more extreme, where one is super career driven and one is super child driven, you still need to have that conversation, and you know, you can have really good conversations about that sort of stuff. But your point, where do you need to get to in your career before you will be up for having children, is a really good way to think about it.
And then one thing that I think we'll just touch on a little bit is one of the other suggestions that someone else has sent in, and that is chores. Because I think we've recently overcome, like, it's not a big problem at all, it's a very, very funny problem, to be fair, in that because we always end up leaving the dishwasher full or not done or whatever, and we always look at the other person to do the dishwasher, we came up with a nice little task for each other, didn't we, quite recently, in that you will load the dishwasher and I will unload the dishwasher.
Exactly.
And something as simple as that. Now we've got like a good conveyor belt of like dishwasher use, whereas before we'd have a huge pile of dishes and we'd both look at each other and go, well, I'm not doing it.
Who's doing that? I mean, I did it last time. Yeah, exactly.
And that's such a tiny, tiny thing. And yet, just having that, okay, well, what if I load it and you unload it? Because that's an equal amount of work on both parts.
Yeah, I think if there is a job like that, like a shared job that either one of you could do, if you almost don't assign it, as bad as it sounds, you'll both be looking at each other all the time. And you think, oh, I'm too busy, they'll do it. They're not as busy today as I am. They won't know that you're busy and they're less busy.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
They're less busy, might still be very busy and they don't have time to do it. And then you'll come down later, see it's not been done, and think, oh, what have you been doing all day? And then, you know, you're both annoyed because one is, why did you expect me to do it and didn't tell me? And the other is, why didn't you do it when I had a busy day? and
Yeah.
it's just awful.
But then also, like, just in natural roles around the house, you've always been the chef. Like, I mean, I can't cook, but you naturally have taken on the role of making meals. And then I think sometimes maybe you think, well, I'm doing all of this, what are you doing? And so I think now I'm the dedicated clothes washer.
Yeah, I will admit there was a bit of that at first, because it felt like, and it sounds really petty, 'cause it's a small thing, but it's a small everyday thing, and they start feeling big. Like, I'm the chef, I'm the gardener, and take the bins out and all that sort of stuff. I had lots of assigned roles. I suppose it's a case of I had done what I would have wanted you to do, maybe, and not communicated it. I said, I will do. I'm only just thinking about this now, actually. I will take these things, and they'll be my things. But then I never spoke to you about that and said, can you take these things? And so it felt like I had a lot of assigned roles to do, and you didn't have any. But that wasn't your fault, that was me.
Yeah.
But then I would think, why isn't she doing anything?
Yeah.
Even though you were.
Also, I think in terms of assigning jobs, work around each other's work life as well, because you work like 9 to 5, and then you have your evenings to do the cooking or to take the bin out in the evening or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas, because my days are so crazy sometimes, it's quite hard to have, like, I might not be here on a Monday night when the bins need to go out or whatever. And so it's like the laundry can be done at any time. So I'll do that. And it's navigating, like, okay, what can we assign to each other that we're willing to take on? Like, I hate doing the dishes, so I did not want that
I know.
role. I think having that assignment of, like, not just big jobs either, because sometimes, like, loading and unloading the dishwasher can feel like a really big job if you're overwhelmed with work or if you're already stressed. And so having just loading the dishwasher or just unloading the dishwasher, just putting the clothes in the laundry basket, simple as that.
Having them assigned, there's a lot of mental clarity I think you get from that. Because we've said, okay, you empty the dishwasher. If I see it full and ready to go, I don't think about it. I'm like, oh yeah, she'll get to it at some point. It's fine. Mm-hmm. It takes away lots of little petty arguments and annoyances that you can have every day by assigning jobs. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
I would recommend it 100%. And it can feel a bit awkward, you know, oh, you do this and you do that and you do this. But it just
but it's like,
it helps.
What would you enjoy doing as well?
Yeah.
Because like when we were trying to assign our roles, obviously, like, I hate doing the dishes, so you were like, okay, well, I don't mind doing that, so I'll do that. And then you were like, well, I hate doing the laundry, and I was like, oh, I don't mind doing the laundry.
Yeah.
And so that just naturally
became... we were lucky, I think, in that the split of jobs fell pretty well. Yeah. We are also probably quite equal on how clean we want to be. In some relationships, one person is incredibly clean and the other person is just a bit of a pig, and they will be
that's usually me.
they'll be happy with the place being a complete mess all the time and will leave stuff everywhere. The clean person will be horrified by this, and then the dirty person will feel like the clean person's nagging them all the time.
Yeah.
You are messier than me, and so how we kind of got around that is we made your studio. You can trash this place as much as you want. Yeah. Please do not trash the rest of the house. There we go.
Has it worked?
I mean, it looks clean here, but no, it has. It has.
So we're going to start kind of wrapping things up a little bit, but I've got a few points that people have sent in. And actually, there's a couple of things which I think relate to us quite nicely, so I'm going to touch on them first. Somebody said, the balance between my depression and my wife's anxiety doesn't always make discussions easy. And I think this is not a big thing for us because we're very, very open about everything. But had we got something that we could touch upon, it is probably the balance between anxiety and, well, even just someone not with anxiety. Because for somebody who's never dealt with anxiety, understanding anxiety is really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it's like any mental health problem, whether it's anxiety or depression. It's by default, you know, you cannot empathise with that person unless you have experienced it. In the same way, you can't empathise with somebody who has had a serious injury. You can sympathise with it. There's a long way people can come, I think, with sympathising with it and trying to understand it. It's having a conversation with your partner, explaining it as much as possible, not just expecting them to get it, because they won't just get it. And like, if it's, say take anxiety, whatever your anxiety is about, if you explain to your partner, okay, I don't know why I feel like this, but this is how it makes me feel. This is what I can't do when I feel like this. this. These are the things that maybe make it worse, and maybe these are some things that I can do or that you could help me do to make it better, or some of the assurances I need, or whatever. Don't expect them to get it right 100% of the time after that conversation, but maybe just constantly little reminders and saying, okay, maybe I need this support today or that support today, can go a really long way in, you know, you both being happier. I think the worst is where you have not verbalized that whatsoever. You're feeling all of the stress, and then that's compounded by having a person who to you is going about life normally and maybe pulling you one way or another, or into situations you don't want to be in, and then you feel awkward about feeling bad about them and all that sort of stuff. It becomes really emotionally messy when you don't have the conversations. And depression's the same. I mean, I've suffered with depression before. If you are depressed, you may take it personally. If I'm miserable all the time and you see me miserable all the time, you might think, oh God, what have I done? Like, why does he not like me or something like that? And it can be really, really difficult. I think, again, just being open with your partner, saying it's not you, it's an issue that I have, it's a problem I'm working through. There are maybe these things that would help, or these things which I would rather you didn't do, but please don't take it personally, and just assuring them as well. You need to explain to them.
If you're in a household where all of these intense emotions are present, like if somebody is dealing with depression, if somebody is dealing with anxiety, like they're nervous about a particular thing, or they're worried about something, or they're overthinking one particular thing, if they're in a household where their partner is not coming out with anything positive to say, it can almost snowball your worries and your nerves and your overthinking, because you're all just focusing on the negatives of something.
Yeah, you know, the framing is negative. You're almost trying to avoid or mitigate problems instead of working towards some sort of solution. Take, say, anxiety, for example. The anxious person might think, I don't want to feel anxiety, so here's all the things that I will not do and all the things that I will avoid, and then I want to make my partner realise that I am not doing A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and that they shouldn't be asking me to do these things, or they need to behave a certain way around me. That is an important half of the conversation, but I think it's half. You know, I think the other half should be, what can we maybe do to start to beat this thing and improve it? You not necessarily beat it, but how can we make it better? What would you be willing to do as a person with anxiety that could make small, incremental, voluntary steps, not being forced in one way or another?
Yeah, which is a conversation that we had quite recently, because I think with anxiety, I've never been an anxious person, but I have been someone who struggles with my mental health as a whole. And there's a difference between going into a low patch with depression and not wanting to do things, and going into a low patch with anxiety where you feel like you can't do things. And sometimes that line can be really blurry. If you push yourself with depression to spend time with a friend, suddenly you can perk up without even realising that you're perking up. But if you are pushed to go do something when you've got anxiety, you could have a panic attack, or you could get really, really flustered or panicky or whatever. And so you need to navigate those things at your own pace, and also, just do them differently. What works for depression doesn't work for anxiety. Breaking them down into small things, like if someone has anxiety about, I don't know, going to a big place like a theme park or a theatre or something like that, then don't just go to the theatre and overcome your fear, but maybe just go near the place, or do something that's like a similar vibe but on a smaller scale, or surround yourself with people that you know are going to be that support network.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to understate how, or rather overstate, how awful depression and anxiety can get. They are just evil things to have to deal with. And it's very easy when you're suffering from it to just go completely inside your own shell, cut yourself off from everything, not want to see or speak to anybody. It's really easy to do that. If you're working through this with a partner, if you are the partner without the issue and your partner's suffering from it, trying to understand it with them and trying to sympathise, and again, not taking it personally. If they shut down and cancel plans and don't want to do anything with you, it's not because they don't like you. They want nothing more than to skip out of the house and have these lovely romantic evenings. They just physically cannot do that.
Yeah. And then it's talking to your partner about, okay, it's not you that's the problem, but like, here's how we together
Could be part of the solution.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes that's all it takes, is just the person with the anxiety just making the decisions of what the baby steps are. You know, you can't have someone else tell you what your baby steps are, because what I tell you might not work for you. And it comes back to, again, that coping language.
If you're the person suffering from the mental health problems, there is a bit of responsibility in a way, or there's some power that you have to think, what tiny baby steps can I take? Do I need my partner for them? Can I do them on my own?
Yeah.
I feel like I keep bringing everything back to this, but it all comes down to just communicating that with each other.
Yeah.
What can you do? Making your partner not feel like it's their fault.
Yeah, and then one other thing I think that we established recently as well is the benefit of writing things down, and like gratitude journaling in a way, because writing down your small achievements for the day, it's like a mind manipulator in a way, because, you know, once you get into the habit of, okay, this is what I achieved today, even if it's something small, like I left the house for 5 minutes, write it down and tick it off, and then you're physically acknowledging your achievement, and then the next day think of another achievement, and suddenly you get into the habit of, oh, what achievement can I have today? And you're looking for the positivity as opposed to fighting against it.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting point actually. So my brother is a neuroscientist. He talks about the sort of neuroplasticity, you know, in your brain. We are habit forming creatures, and depression, it doesn't quite do it justice to call it a habit, but you get into a habit of being depressed.
But a slave to it in a way. Like when you feel good, you feel guilty for feeling good.
It becomes addictive, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, the second you feel anything other than this abyss of despair, your brain goes, what are you doing?
Yeah.
That's not how you should be feeling about this, and it pulls you back into it. What I'm getting to is the point on, say, gratitude journaling, or trying to make some tiny, almost insignificantly easy step to have some sort of positive habit that will positively, you know, reinforce, like gratitude journaling, forces you to focus on the good things. And yeah, it's awful the first time you do it. You might think, there's nothing I can write in here. Even if you just write something you don't really think, you don't really mean, I'm alive, that's good enough. Even if it just stays at that point for a few weeks, after a while, maybe there'll be something else you could add. The coffee I had this morning was okay. Great. Trying to reinforce and grow that part of your brain back goes a huge way. It's certainly
really
what worked
does.
for me, like little bits. I think it's easy in that situation to get frustrated at yourself and think, if I only had the willpower, I could just get over it. I'm the problem. I've got no willpower. Willpower is rubbish at dealing with these sorts of things. It doesn't work. You know, don't think about maybe the free will aspect of it, because you've got a problem which is just taking that away from you. I always try and set up my life almost in a scientific way. I don't think about how I'm feeling. I just think, if I, say, do gratitude journaling, I get some sunlight in the morning, I do a bit of exercise if I can. All of those things just raise the floor slightly. And I don't try and just think, oh, well, I should be here and I'm not. I just try and set things up in such a way that I will naturally be more likely to move in a positive direction.
Yeah, and once you're in that habit, well, developing the habit in the first place is the hardest part, because it's very easy to just miss one day and then you're out of the habit immediately. But making sure, even if you just do one thing a day, you know, you might have 5 goals of what you want to do, but even if you just do one, that's one thing that you can acknowledge.
Yeah.
But I found in that year where I was just really struggling with grief, I had a gratitude journal. And when I first got it, I was like, what do I even write in it? Like, my day has been so boring. I've not done anything. I've not even left the house. I've just cried all day. I was struggling to think of anything to write. And like you say, it starts off with really insignificant things where you're just writing for the sake of writing. But then every day I made sure I did it like it was a religious thing. And suddenly, within like 3 weeks, I was like, oh, I saw a little bird today that was really cute.
Yeah.
And I would never have paid any attention to that bird. But suddenly, I call it new car syndrome. Like, when you're looking for a car that you want, you start seeing it everywhere.
It's the habit that you're forming in your brain.
it.
You're strengthening those pathways to look for good things.
Yeah.
And you become a more positive person.
The moment you start thinking about, what can I write in my gratitude gratitude journal today? If you can start asking yourself the question of like, what's good about today, then you start looking for the good things.
Yeah, exactly. For me, I didn't do gratitude journaling at the time when I was bad. I would do things like maybe acknowledge that there are certain things which will almost scientifically raise my mood, whether I feel it or not. So one was like getting sunlight in the morning. Like I wake up, I open my curtains and I just stare at the sky. You get 100 times more vitamin D from an overcast sky than you do from lights inside. So I do that and I'd be like, okay, this is pointless, but I'll do it anyway. And then I would do a bit of exercise, even if it was like one push-up or something, or walk for 2 minutes. For ages, I was like, this is pointless. But I almost just thought, I need to do things like this, and I'll hopefully start to get a positive feedback loop. And it might be ages before I see anything. And that's really difficult to do, because human beings, we just want everything like now.
Yeah.
We're like instant gratification, you know. But eventually, probably similar to you, what would start happening was I just wouldn't feel as terrible. And then maybe I'd do a bit more exercise that day, or go out for a longer walk, or do something else positive, cook myself something nice. And I never, a few weeks ago, would have had the energy to do that. It would have been impossible. It's like the gym. Like if you start going to the gym and you've never been to the gym before and you think, oh, I want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger tomorrow, yeah, good luck. You'll work way too hard in the gym. You'll be in there for ages. You won't enjoy it. You'll be really sore the next day. You'll be tired. You'll think, that was awful. I'm never doing it again.
But if you get on the treadmill and put like a movie on your phone and watch that or something, suddenly you've been on the treadmill for like a half an hour and not even noticed. And then the next day you can go, okay, well, I'll do that again. And then I'll also just add a little bit of the bike in, or I'll lift one weight.
Yeah, exactly. And then that progress starts to become addictive. You enjoy it.
Yeah.
And it obviously releases lots of dopamine.
And that's it. Having a physical task, like whether it's, looking out the window or it's writing in your gratitude journal, an action of sorts is so powerful.
Yeah, definitely.
Of a source of acknowledgement.
Yeah, even say like being on a treadmill or being on a bike or something like that. If you do that for 15 minutes, that's 15 minutes where your brain is engaged in something other than the depression that you're dealing with. Even if it just pulls you out very slightly or just up slightly, you're spending less time at the bottom of the trench, so to speak. And again, your brain will get used to not being there, or more used to not being there. And I think that's it. It's acknowledging no amount of willpower. You're not going to read a nice quote on Facebook that's going to just completely change how you view the world. You need to think about the physical things.
Yeah.
What can I do to rewire my own brain? Habits are incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And I think habits...
Yeah, they really are.
You can do anything with habits. Even, say, linking it right back to finances and saving, if you, between the two of you agree, we're going to have a habit of, or 1% of my disposable income I'm going to save and invest.
I am going to read one more point, and this is what somebody else has sent in, and I think we've touched on this more or less through a lot of the conversation, but I thought I'd read it out because it's a nice informative point that somebody has sent in. And they said, everybody has their own demons that don't disappear once you are in a relationship. So that's why it's important to work on it instead of expecting your partner to fix you, because your partner simply doesn't have this ability. Some people believe that their own inner problems will be magically healed by their partner, but I think if you are not happy when you're on your own, you still won't be happy with someone by your side.
That person's a genius. I absolutely love that.
It is true.
Yeah,
your partner
is.
can't fix you,
Yeah.
but you can work together to evolve into like a really powerful force together.
They can help, absolutely. The problem is when you think, I'm going to date someone and they're going to save me and they will fix everything. They won't know how, because you won't tell them how. They're not a licensed psychologist. They can't deal with all of your issues for you. They're another person with their own problems. It's actually a very selfish thing to do, to think that another person will just fix everything for you and take care of everything. Life's hard for both of you, and you need to be able to work together, and you can work on yourself. You are the expert on yourself. Other people can help and maybe give you different perspectives, but at the end of the day, it has to be a journey that you go through.
I guess just a final point as well is someone's put, cliche, but everyone has mental health and navigating through that is key. I think that's a good final point, because you might have your demons that you need to work through with your partner, but it's also so crucial that you listen to your partner's perspective as well, because they will also be struggling with something, whether it's a mental health thing or whether it's a consequence of that they can see that you're not happy with the help that you're giving them or whatever. Everyone is their own person, and when there are difficult topics at play, everyone navigates them very differently, and that's why it's all good you talking about what's affecting you, but you also need to listen and understand the perspective of the other person as well.
Yeah, 100%. Everybody has physical health. Everybody has mental health.
Yeah.
You know, some people are lucky in that they have not had any major physical health problems in their lives, and some people have not had any major mental health problems in their lives. But not to be negative, I think most people will experience something at some point. I think it's just trying to sympathize and empathize and understand people, but also you need to be able to talk to people about what you need. And like the previous point, don't expect someone to just know how to fix all of your problems for you. You have to be able to tell people what you need as well.
Yeah, amazing. Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank
That was
you for
nice.
talking with me. Bye.
Bye.
Once again, thank you very much for tuning in to today's episode. We covered a great deal of things in today's discussion, and I hope that you found something of use that you can apply to your own relationship, or that you learned something in how you can communicate a difficult subject with your partner. But thank you very much for listening to another episode of the Calm Within the Storm podcast with me, Sam Lyon, and my partner, Mason Burke. See you again soon. Bye!
Everything can change, even the world we live in.